And I've seen a lot of investors go into a deal initially, it's maybe small investors as well, without being well capitalized. And I'll guarantee you right now there's going to be people that's going to be in trouble because they're like just barely scraping by with good rent collection, and suddenly if their rent collection drops 10 or 20%, they can't pay their debt anymore and they get in trouble. So have money in the bank, even if it's a good day, just have some money set aside so you can cover those unexpected expenses, drop in occupancy, whatever it may be, right? So just be ready for that.
Welcome to Real Estate Deal Closers with Anette, Talie, where we focus on the deals. Our guests are real estate closers who will share in detail the whole process from finding a deal to closing it, as well as strategies and tips to help you do the same. Here is your host, Anette, Talie.
Welcome to another episode of Deal Closers. I am your host, Anette, Talie, and my guest today is Jens Nielsen. Welcome, Jens.
Hi, Anette. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to talk to you today.
I am very excited too. So let me tell you people about Jens. He immigrated from Denmark in 1996, and after a career in IT, he became an entrepreneur and started investing in multifamily real estate. He currently owns 74 units in New Mexico and Colorado and is a general partner on over 750 syndicated units around the country. Wow, that's very impressive.
Thank you.
Over the last few years, he also passively invested in 14 syndications, private investments spanning over 800 units, 2,000 mobile park lots, and over 6,000 storage units, plus mortgage note funds and private money lending. Jens also has a passion for coaching new investors and enable their success through strategy, accountability, and personal growth. Awesome. So tell me, how did you go from IT to real estate investing? Tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, I've had a good career in IT and, made good money, working. But I also realized that if I ever wanted to retire, the traditional retirement plan that we have, 401k and everything else, it felt like it was going to take too long and I would have to work another 20 years and just, spend the rest of my good life working for somebody else. And I kind of had that realization 5 years ago. I was like, I need to do something different. I need to take my financial future in my own hands and really go out there and make something for myself, because I've always been relying on somebody else to give me a job. If I wanted more money, I had to find a new job or something like that, or promotion. So I said, hey, this is the time to do something. And I picked up, like many people, I started listening to some audiobooks and podcasts, and I was like, man, this is the way to go. Real estate investing is really the approach that's going to excel and give me to that next level in life. So that was the decision I made. I'm still employed, but the real estate is really taking off. And this summer I am going to go to part-time in my job and then eventually exit my job. So I'm super excited about that.
OMG. So you are still working your IT job?
Yes.
So for people that say, I don't have time, like there is no excuse. I also work. I have a W2 job. I do work part-time, but I have 2 kids and I do property management. So I am pretty busy. And then I still find time. Like if you have a passion and you are really focused, you can get, small steps take you a long way. So that's
Absolutely.
very impressive.
The Deal.
All right. So what deal do you want to talk about today?
Yes, I think, the one deal that I think may be pretty interesting for your audience is this 11-unit apartment complex we purchased in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it's been 2.5 years, actually 3.5 years now. It's 3.5 years since we bought it. So it's been a little while, but pretty interesting, project or property because it was, I had bought a couple of smaller deals and I wanted to go up something a little bit bigger, kind of into the commercial size, 5 units and above. And I had a good relationship with my broker. And I kept saying, well, what's next? What's next? He said, well, I found this property. It was like 370. No, it was listed at over $400,000 initially for 11 units. We went and we looked at it and we're like, man, this is not worth that kind of money. A little bit run down, it doesn't work and stuff. But the attractive thing was the seller wanted to offer seller financing. So, that was immediately, hey, it's a lot easier than having to go to the bank and, produce all of the paperwork and pay all that money. So that was attractive. It was seller finance. What I didn't like about the deal initially was, as I mentioned, it was a little bit tired. The sellers were just kind of like, I guess, almost slumlords because they didn't really do any work on there.
Was it a C class, B class, D class?
C, maybe C minus at that time.
I think for me, if I hear seller financing and it's not D class, I am all for it. Depending on the price, obviously, but if you can get it with low money down and then seller finance, it's probably going to be a really good deal.
Yeah. I think they realized that it was going to be difficult to go out and get bank financing because of the condition the property was in. So they offered the seller finance. They owned it outright. So me and my broker spent some time looking at it, and we're like, well, I think 375 is probably a number that makes more sense. But we also realized, hey, we probably have to put $50,000 to $100,000 worth of rehab into this property. I was like, that's too much. It just the numbers didn't really add up. So I was kind of, potentially looking to walk away from it. But then my broker, and this is really the creative thing I think is awesome about this, is my broker said, well, why don't we come up with let's come up with lower down payments. I think I paid like $50,000 down, right? So, it was, what was that, 10 or 15%. But the interesting part was, let's see if we can negotiate like a 10-month no payment. So basically, for the first 10 months of the ownership, we didn't have any payment and not even any accrued interest. We just didn't pay for 10 months. And then we used the cash flow to start rehabbing the property. So I didn't have to come up with, all that money to rehab it. So we basically just started, when there's some vacant units, we would take the cash flow and we would pour it back straight into the units, and we put a new roof on because down in New Mexico, a lot of flat roofs, which, if they start leaking, you have a major problem. So we replaced the roof immediately, and then we started rehabbing the units. And that was anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. Some needed a lot of work, some just studs, others were just more cosmetic. So we just kind of went through that process. So that was kind of just the start of that. I don't know how much more you want to dig into.
So let's unpack a little bit. So let's talk about how did you find the deal? Was this a listed deal, or did your broker bring it to you through your relationship?
I think it was listed. I think it was listed by a residential broker, which is kind of interesting, right? Because they don't know how to really market it very well. And it was right around. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I love those deals that the residential brokers have, because the commercial people are not looking there. So you can find good deals in the residential MLS because the brokers don't know. The challenge is getting to understand that you cannot price it the way that you would in a house. It's not the same.
Yeah. So, and I think then, my broker had a relationship with the selling broker and they connected that way, right? So, and I think the key piece here, having a really good, this gentleman who I've been working with for the last 4 or 5 years, he's very well connected in the community, well respected, an older gentleman, and really is making himself known. So I think a lot of brokers will connect with him if they have a deal they want to sell. So that's been a really good relationship. And, he's become a mentor of mine and we actually partnered. So it's more than just that broker relationship. So that's been super awesome there.
And how did you find this broker?
So that was so that's maybe stepping back a little bit. So when I first started, I wanted to invest in real estate. I was like, who do I know who's doing this. And one of my good friends, I live in a small town, but one of my good friends has actually invested in real estate, and I had dinner with him, and I said, "Who do you know I should know?" That's a question people should ask. Who do you know that I should know? I don't know. I heard it somewhere. I can't take credit for this, but so, and he said, "Oh, you need to call up this Mr. Chuck down in Albuquerque. He had done deals with me. I really respect him." So I called him up and I said, "Hey, I'm a new investor. I want to start investing." And I think one of the things I did early on, I committed to the process. We found a 4-unit, and I was able to close on it. And I didn't waste his time. So he felt, okay, this is a guy who's going to take action. I think, from a broker, you're protecting your time, right? You don't want to waste a bunch of time with people. So he knew that I could take action, and therefore it really, pushed us forward that way.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very important. Like, don't waste their time, because then they are not going to bring you any deals if you're not able to close. Absolutely. All right. So you said the listing price was $375, but you were able to lower it.
Actually, I think the listing price was
$400.
Yeah, $425. I think we're able to lower it. So we lowered to $375. And I think and then we negotiated the terms with the seller, and we ended up getting 5% interest. I think it was 25-year amortization, and was it a 7-year balloon? I think it was. So fairly reasonable terms there. But the interesting piece was that, the 10 months, I didn't have to pay anything for 10 months, so we were collecting, $6,000 in rent, and most of that we could pour straight back into the property, right? So I didn't have to come out with a bunch of additional cash. Obviously, my cash flow was also not very good because I put all the money back into the deal, right? But that was okay.
And how many partners did you do this with?
Just myself, me and my wife.
Just you.
Yeah.
Also, it was excellent because you didn't have to, ask anybody, should we do this, should we do that? It was all your decision. And you mentioned that the broker had the idea of, no payment. How did the seller react to this initially?
Yeah, I didn't, have the initial conversation with the seller, but I think they realized that they probably weren't going to be able to get the money they wanted for it. So we, without becoming creative because it needed so much work. It kind of worked out. I think we initially had, what changed, I'm trying to remember, we initially had a lower interest rate if we were just going to buy it for that price. He was offering a lower interest rate, but I wouldn't get that opportunity for that no payment. Once we started negotiating, it changed to a little bit higher interest rate. I think we had to come up with a little bit more money, but we got that, the 6 months, which essentially was, 50 or 60 grand we earned, right? The terms changed a little bit, but it was still fine. I mean, 5%, 3.5 years ago was still pretty reasonable interest rate. So,
but it shows that, you can be flexible with the owner, right? Like, you didn't stop at, okay, we cannot do it. So, okay, let's see how we can do it.
Yeah. I think as real estate investors, we're here to solve a problem, right? What is the seller's problem? But this seller, he was tired of managing it. They're typical mom and pop managers, and they were in friends with everybody, and people paying them cash and being late, and just a mess. And they needed to get out of it, and that was their problem. So we were able to come up with a creative solution that solved their problem and solved my problem of wanting to buy it without having to put a ton of money into it. Right?
Absolutely. And so tell me, what were the rents before, and once you took over and were able to improve it, how did it improve?
So rents were very low. They were like under $500. They were anywhere from, I think, $350 to $500. As we slowly, so it's a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms. I think about 50-50. As we went in there and rehabbed them, we're able to raise the rents, the 1 bedrooms to like $550, and the 2 bedrooms to like $650. And that may sound cheap depending on where you are, but in that market, that's the going rate, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, for you know, class C, C minus kind of property, that's what they rent for. But and you know, so we've actually in the later ones this year, we were able to raise the rent to like 650, 675, which is pretty good for that market. So we definitely improved the cash flow quite a lot.
Awesome. And what type of renovations did you do in the apartments? Did you completely remodel the apartments, or did you do like it was a C class, right? So what type of renovations did you?
Yeah, so we started with the roof, I guess, because in you know, in Southwest, flat roofs, and you don't want us to leak, so we put like a TPO, like a rubber roof on there, and then we started doing the units. I don't like carpets in my apartments because it's ugly and it wears and it's whatever. So if there were carpets in the units, we would put in either tile or the vinyl plank flooring, right? Depending on. Tile has been very popular in the Southwest. It seems like they're moving more to the vinyl plank flooring because it's better value for money. So we would put that in on the floor. We would. The bathrooms were pretty bad, so most of them we would tear down all the shower walls, even maybe pull the tub out and redo that. So the bathrooms got a really heavy rework because there were some mold issues and stuff. The kitchens, we tried to leave the kitchens because again, we didn't want to spend 15 grand on a class C, so we tried to leave the kitchens, maybe just paint them. If the countertops were good, we would leave that in there. So just kind of, what would it take to make it nice for the price range? So we've done anywhere from anywhere from like $4,000 to $5,000 all the way to 10 grand. And the 10 grand was because we needed a new heater and a water heater. And that added up, right? That's quickly, $3,000 for that stuff, right? So
Right.
that's been the mix. And we put new windows in because it had the old like aluminum single pane windows, and we put new windows in as well. So it's been pretty significant for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you do the 4,000 on the units and you have to really look at the market. Like some markets don't need to have a granite countertop to rent for more, and other markets is expected. So you have to I realized that on one of my units that I kind of improved it a little bit too much for the market. And then once I had the renters, I realized that was probably too much for this market. Like I didn't need stainless steel appliances. White appliances would have worked fine. So, yeah, awesome.
And we may have put, some of these units, if we were just looking at the bottom line, we may put more money into it than we should. But I'm also not looking to exit in 5 years. I'm looking for a longer term hold because I don't have any investors to answer to. So if I can get it kind of nice, kind of running, I don't have to worry about repairs. I just want to hang on to it, right, and do cash flow for as long as I can, right?
Awesome.
Expert tips.
All right, so now we are in the part of the show where you're going to give me 3 expert tips. Okay. And you wanted to talk about underwriting.
That's right. So I think the expert tips are, number one, there's a story in the rent roll that we need to read. And by that story, I mean, look at what are the delinquencies and what are the delinquencies and late fees that people are paying. Quite often you will see a very high number under there. And that's really a red flag, because that means that you are having a lot of trouble collecting rent. It may be an income stream, but it's also a lot of headaches to collect late rent. So kind of look at the story in the rent roll and see, are people late on rent regularly, because that's a red flag for sure.
So how do you deal with this? If you see one that has a lot, like it could be also the management team not managing properly and not following up, correct? So how do you gauge what to do?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at the demographics and say, okay, what neighborhood are we in? Should this neighborhood or should this property in this neighborhood have these problems, or is it just poor management, right? So I think the next tip is look at all the other expenses and really see how is it being managed, right? Are there very high, management costs? Are there very high repairs and maintenance costs, right? So all those things kind of paints a picture. But I think too many people get stuck in their spreadsheets and they just plug the numbers in and they try to normalize everything. I thought it looks good, but you really have to look at those numbers. And my second tip is really, if you see a very high expense ratio, be careful about assuming you can just go in there and change that, because are you sure that you can operate this deal better than the current owner can, right? Maybe, but don't be very careful about those assumptions, because everybody says, oh, you should have 50% expense ratio. Maybe, but if you have a very old property where everything breaks every month and you have a lot of repairs in there, it may be very difficult to get down to that level.
Right.
So that's the other thing on the underwriting. And then I think the third one, make sure when you underwrite, make sure you put enough reserves into your underwriting, especially now if you're doing larger deals through agency financing. They're going to require anywhere from 6 to 18 months worth of reserves if you get a Freddie or Fannie loan. So you have to think about that and see, okay, if I put all that money into reserves, how's that going to affect my returns or, the amount of money I need to raise? So definitely consider that as well.
Right. So, if you're doing it by yourself, you're going to have the money before you even, to put it on reserves, right? But if you're doing a syndication, maybe that can be, you can allocate part of the money to reserve. It's a little bit probably easier to do it. But the requirements have gone high.
Yeah, very much so. And what I typically say to people, okay, if you have a value add plan for your property, maybe you put some of that money into reserves, and you then, if you can operate the property, you get that back after a year or whatever it is, and then you can continue your strategy with that money. So it's not like it's money you need. You may not need to raise all that in addition to your regular raise, but you just got to figure out what the plan is, and also kind of tell your investors that, well, it was a year value add strategy, now it's going to be a 2-year value add strategy, something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. That's good. And what percentage of reserves would you keep in the property, or how do you, when you underwrite, not counting the reserves that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are asking, but like if even like before the pandemic, what would you reserve as your normal percentage?
I think percentage is maybe harder, but I would look at maybe having 6 months worth of operating expenses there. So, you can pay your debt, you can pay your insurance, your taxes and things like that, right? So you have some. That does not include any kind of, rehab or CapEx expenses. That's a whole other thing, right? But have at least 6 months or something. So, if things don't go quite as well, or if, in the middle of a pandemic and people.
Or if something like this happens, then you're prepared.
That's right. And I've seen a lot of investors go into a deal initially, it's maybe small investors as well, without being well capitalized. And I'll guarantee you right now, there's going to be people that's going to be in trouble because they're like just barely scraping by with good rent collection, and suddenly if their rent collection drops 10 or 20%, they can't pay their debt anymore and they get in trouble. So have money in the bank, even if it's a good day. Just have some money set aside so you can cover those unexpected expenses, drop in occupancy, whatever it may be, right? So just be ready for that.
Yeah, excellent advice. Thank you so much for being here. And can you please tell the audience where can they find you if they are interested in your mentorship or if they want to contact you?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so my website is Open Doors with an S, opendoorscapital.com. And if anybody want to email me, you can go to Jens, Jens, at opendoorscapital.com. And also offer a free strategy call to anybody who wants to get on a call, so they can go to opendoorscapital.com/call, schedule a free 20-minute call with me. I've had 100 of these calls. I love to talk to investors throughout the country or wherever they want, for coaching or mentorship or investing, whatever they're looking for. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
This was Real Estate Deal Closers with Anette Talie, brought to you by Talie Investments. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Our goal is to provide amazing value on your real estate journey. Connect online at www.talieinvestments.com, where you can find this episode and more. Did you like this episode? Subscribe, like, and share.